Toastmaster Prasanna, District Director Sujil, dignitaries, members, everyone who's present over here. Such a pleasure always to be part of District 127 session. It's my pleasure, privilege, honor to be doing this. I've done this, in fact, the same class lecture session, call it what you will, a couple of years ago when we started looking at design as part of brand and design as part of the pillars of a successful Toastmasters Club experience. So I'm going to take you through a portion of that. I don't want to make it, it's going to be a slightly quick, almost elevator pitch kind of a session here. But the objective for this session today is to look at a very particular set of, fundamentals of what makes design a design. Now, we all dabble with design every single day. We are continuously, it's a ubiquitous thing, as you would all agree. Everywhere around us, there is design. What we're going to talk about today is a very, very small subset of design fundamentals. And I'll quickly take you through the brand manual. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if you're aware or you've seen this before. I'm sure part of the COT you may have covered a bit of the brand manual, etc. So two parts. I think I have 40 minutes, 45 minutes, Toastmaster Prasanna, as much as we can. So we'll quickly look at what's happening in both these cases. There's a PowerPoint slide. I am guilty of using PowerPoint slide as a crutch. I hope it doesn't come across as a crutch, and it is useful to underscore what I'm telling you. Keep it free. Stop me whenever you want. Make it a discussion if you will. We're after all Toastmasters. I think we should kind of be there for each other. All right. So first things first is again. Let me see. Why is my not moving? Yep, there we are. My favorite line in all of design and its pedagogy, call it what you will. Design is not decoration. And there's a very specific reason, especially in corporate communications or when we use design to communicate commercial or educational or things like we do when we need to kind of get across to our audience. Design, therefore, is never for the sake of it. Design helps you to underscore the value, the depth, and the intensity of your communication and the proprietary nature of your communication to your audience. Now, as Toastmasters, we are all aware we live by the tenets of RISC. Respect, integrity, service, and excellence. We are a professionally sounding, looking organization in toto, and our ethos is to present ourselves as professional, as communicators, and as leaders to the outside world. So therefore, it is imperative that whatever we put out into the larger world from Toastmasters, whether it be in the spoken form, which we already learned to speak, but also in the written form and in the communicative form, we make sure that whatever we do it with purpose. Design helps you to kind of find and manage or channel that purpose, and that is why we kind of look at it with a particular view that design is not decoration. So you don't do things because you like to do it for the sake of it. You do it because you want to communicate a specific message, and to underscore that message again. If you need to define it, Charles Ames, a famous designer, architect, and filmmaker, said this very clearly, and I like this definition of design for its own sake. So design is a plan for arranging elements. When I say elements, are the elements wherever you are deploying that design in. So it's a plan for arranging elements in such a way as best to accomplish a particular purpose. So that's always the guiding force, the guiding principle of design when you apply it, even in your Toastmasters units, anywhere that you would apply it, but particularly since you're speaking about Toastmasters and the Toastmasters design and the branding is subject in toto, we want to accomplish a particular purpose. That particular purpose in our context, again, let's also understand that we are communicating to a general audience what Toastmasters is and what your Toastmasters club is all about. So there are two things that you're always trying to communicate, and that needs to be in your mind whenever you're, when you're taking or doing or handling design for Toastmasters. So with that spirit in mind, let's get into a little bit. I mean, into the flesh of what design always is. Design is a large, vast subject, and there's plenty going around. You have abstract design, you have design for the sake of it. Again, here we're talking about essentially graphic design, call it you will. But wherever you see design, you can somehow structure or you can organize design across three primary pillars. Okay, there are elements in a design. I'll come to the granular details in just a minute. There is composition of those elements, which means what are the relative relationships of these elements in that overall design, and that plays a very key part. And then, of course, to make the elements and the composition work all together, you work according to a certain set of principles, which is what obviously makes design what it is. So that's essentially the case. So if you were to look at these three, you need to be dabbling, you need to be juggling, you need to be managing the elements or the constituents of these three pillars effectively, efficiently, to come out with what is known as a good design. Now, as you would imagine, each of these granular points over here are subjects by themselves. So we are not going to cover all of them. But typically, what I have understood or what I always carry or lay a lot of weight on is this element called composition, right? So I always thought that if you get your composition right, or the elements of the composition right, you more or less come up with, not just a passable or a workable, you come out with a really good example of a communication element. Essentially, you kind of pass the design test, right? Let me narrate each of the elements in each of these pillars quickly. Right? So you've got the elements of design. So elements of design are line, shape, color, texture, typography, images, right? If you look at this sheet itself, this slide that you're looking at, you have every variety of these things. You've got a line, you've got a little red rectangle happening there, which is a line by itself. You've got the underscoring of the elements, composition, the principles, which are lines. They're all doing a function. That line below elements is underscoring elements. So therefore, it's doing a job. It's drawing your attention to elements. So you've got shapes. You've got the rectangles over here. You've got the meatball of the Toastmasters a logo. You're seeing essentially rectangles over here. I could have any and many kinds of shapes over here. I decided to be very minimal. It's a conceit that I work with, and I keep it just limited to, say, the squares and the rectangles. You have colors over here. You have the gray of the background. You have the darker grays of the logo. You might see a blue somewhere over here. You have the happy yellow over here, the maroon in that little highlight square of the composition pack, etc., etc., etc. You have textures too. Maybe you don't notice it, but there's a shadow element in those yellow boxes. That's a texture. There's a certain grain in that gray element. That's a texture. So texture is the feel, the visual feel, if you may. I'm actually doing this of what you see, which is an important part of one of the design elements. Then you have typography, and in Toastmasters particularly, because it's a very limited set of brand guidelines that work that allow for Toastmasters. Typography takes on a lot more meaning and a lot more principle. We'll see a few examples as we go ahead as to how typography matters. Typography essentially are the written words over here. So any word, anything that is written over here is typography. So the typefaces that you use, the colors that are not the colors, the typefaces, the kind of fonts, the kind of weights of the fonts, italics or solids, etc., etc., etc. That's all got to do with typography. Again, a subject on its own. Images speak for themselves. Basically, the picture, the photographs that you see over here. Now, on the slide, you don't see any images or photographs, but you see me on the screen, and I'm an image. The virtual background behind me is an image, and these images are always speaking about the message that we're carrying through. So the virtual background, if you see, so masterfully done by good Mr. Prasanna, tells you about Toastmasters. It follows the colors. There's an abstract pattern going on over there, so on and so forth. That gathers your attention into the screen, and you kind of helps you to see me as a person over here. So this is essentially what typically happens with design, with any element of design. So images, you have it over there. Let me go to then, because I'm going to deal with composition. The reason I highlighted composition with that maroon rectangle is because that's what you're going to delve a bit deeper into. So let me quickly run through principles. Now you've got principles, and then principles come into play because principles are how you manage or you juggle the various elements in their realm or in their system. So you've got things like alignment, you have balance, you have contrast, you have emphasis, hierarchy. The words speak for themselves, and they're essentially what they mean. And on the next few examples, we may even see a few examples to kind of clarify it for your head. But there are all of these elements that you would use, you would juggle with, you would apply so that your design speaks to your audience the way you intend it to. So it's a skill. It's a skill. This is your gateway into learning that skill or the theory of that skill. And so let's go into a bit more detail. My favorite pillar among these three pillars, like I already said, was composition, because I've always held that if you get your composition right, you get your design right. Let's go a little bit deeper into composition, right? Please ask questions if I'm going too fast, too slow. If you want me to stop me, by all means, be my guest and stop me in middle. So let's start with composition. Now, if you were to imagine any design deliverable, call it if you will, like for example, this PowerPoint slide, for example, any one of your flyers, for example, anything that you would see as an execution that where design is applied, you need to visualize it as a grid. So the grid perhaps is one of the older and one of the most fundamental and one of the most useful elements in design. What the grid helps you to do, and grid again, uh, it's not rocket science. It's essentially what I've done over here. So if you see that hat square over here as your flyer, then the hatch is a flyer. Then I've just divided this hatch into a grid, right? What the grid does is now it gives you a position, a map, if you will, of your flyer. You now have coordinates for various positions, regions, and locations on your flyer. And now all you need to do is you need to then place your elements strategically across various points over here. We'll come to that again. So the first thing a designer would do is to view his canvas. It could be a flyer, it could be a poster, it could be a PowerPoint slide, whatever you will. You view it as a grid. I've done this grid in this PowerPoint slide itself. Now, for example, if you look at it, I've got three main or four main elements that I'm communicating in this PowerPoint slide, not what I'm speaking, what's on the slide. So you've got this white square, which is what I'm trying to use to illustrate the grid. You've got composition underscore the grid. There is something that's written over there. You've got the meatball, the Toastmasters logo on that side. You've got the District 127 logo on the bottom right. If you watch me going on thread, all of these remain constant. And I've done this strategically. I've actually placed these things on particular positions on a grid that I drew on this entire PowerPoint slide. It helps me to, number one is communicate to you. It helps you to view this clearly. You're seeing everything clearly. There's no chaos. There's no confusion. It's easy on the eye. You're seeing what needs to be seen, and you're able to, I hope, you're able to match what I'm speaking with what is now there on the slide. Again, it's a microcosm of how design particularly works. So the first element you have is a grid, and a grid is nothing but simply a set of lines that you would draw to lay out your canvas being a flyer or whatever it is that you're working on. Once you have the grid, then you come to a position where my screen is not scrolling. Okay. And why should that be? Yeah, here's a grid. So here's what I said. Again, so you have the grid, and then you use the grid to lay out the elements of your composition across grid. So the grayed out squares over here are various things that you would position on your grid: images, text, blocks of text, graphics, call it what you will. We leave it at that for now. So an example of a grid is a flyer that I made many years ago. I think this was 3 years ago, I suppose. And here again, you'll see it. So the white is the canvas. You have the canvas happening over here. The blue lines are the grid. And if you will notice, most, if not all of the elements are marked at particular specific positions on this grid. So if you look at the approximate center of it, let me see if I can get my laser out over here somehow. And no, yep, right. Can you see a laser? Can you see a little red dot? Someone help me here.
Yes, we
No,
can.
okay, now you can.
Can we?
Sorry, go ahead.
And the dot is too small for. Is there a chance
Okay,
to?
so I have no way to increase the size, so kind of go with me over here, please. I'll keep it a little bit jiggly or whatever it is. So you have the grid that I mentioned. So you have the lines here that define the grid. This grid, I'll cover it in the next slide. It's called a rule of third grid. So which means I divide this into 9 equal squares, gives me a grid to work with. Most of the content are arranged along certain axes of the grid itself. So you have the main content, which is the trainer's details over here in the center. The headline is somewhere over here in the top 1/3. I try to kind of place it across the line of thirds over here. The Toastmasters occupies its own space in a top left grid. No, but nothing else over there. If you look at it, helps you to visibly use it, and then all the information is kind of follows along this axis over here. So it's a design thing, but ultimately what we are seeing is everything is placed across the grid by itself. And when you look at the grid, if you would have noticed, you would have also seen those lines falling through. So the rule of thirds is perhaps the most well used, perhaps the most useful way of drawing out or laying out your canvas itself. There are many ways of laying out a canvas, but the rule of thirds is the simplest and perhaps one of the most useful ways to do it. What you're doing here is you're simply dividing your canvas into 9 blocks, 9 squares with equally spaced parallel lines. Again, it's a very arbitrary, it's a very abstract way of doing it. There's really no reason to kind of to question why it is done, other than that, it gives you coordinates, it gives you places to keep things or to place things on your canvas. The rule of thirds is something that you'd use to draw your grid and to understand and map your canvas accordingly. An example of rule of thirds and how it is done is over here. So when I have a rule of thirds, then here again, I've done the exact same thing. I'm aligning elements. So if you see these circles which convey a certain information, in this case, it is the meeting dates and times of clubs at that of a certain club. So I'm trying to kind of keep it along this grid. And that makes a lot of why we do it that way is because it's also how your eye works. Your eye moves across a canvas, typically, usually in such a fashion. It usually moves from left to right, top to bottom, or from right to left, top to bottom, depending on what your cultural background is. But typically in the Western world, with most of Western, typography, lithography, you're reading from up to down, right to left. A grid system helps you to kind of follow that, and that's how you keep and maintain the elements over here. So that's the second thing that you look about. Now you've seen the grid, you've seen the rule of thirds. The third thing that we look at now is what is called as a focal point. Now, focal point, again, one of the important elements of arranging your design and maintaining your design. What focal point means is any communication that you have, whatever that you put out, will have one point or single point of interest. So your job as a designer is to bring your audience or your viewers' eye to that point of interest. So this is what I'm doing over here. Yes, we know it's a congratulations flyer. We know there's somebody called Prashant Toastmaster Prashant Raj who's been elected director. This is a very old one. I just use as an example. But the point over here is your eye is instantly drawn to Toastmasters Prashant's photograph. And I did that on purpose. I keep him in the center of the canvas. I keep his photograph as the largest element on this canvas. There's nothing bigger than his photograph on this canvas, on this flyer. It is purposely done. It is purposely done because as a designer, my job is to bring your eye into instant and constant attention to Toastmaster Prashant, the person who's there on the photograph. And then you have the ancillary elements that are working in. Of course, what are we talking about? What is Toastmaster Prashant doing over here? Well, one is we are congratulating him. Why are we congratulating him? Then your eye travels to him, the Toastmaster Prashant, Area 24 Director-elect. So if you look at this, and we're going to come to a point as we go forward in this thing, after the focal point, is your eye is now getting into that flyer, and then it's kind of navigating. It is easily navigating through the information presented over there. And so the focal point is something that you need to pay attention to in a flyer. This is a Toastmasters flyer. Let me show you a couple of examples, nice examples from outside the Toastmasters world of how the focal point works. Now, here's an excellent example that I found a long time ago about a focal point. Now, if you see here, the design itself does such a grand job. It's a very busy flyer, right? So it does not mean that you cannot pack your flyer with information. You can pack your flyer with as much information you need, but as a designer, it's your job to kind of make sure what is happening and where you want the viewer's eye to move and in what order. Let's leave the order aside first, but you want to grab the attention. And see how beautifully it's done over here. Lots of information. My God, it's chock full of information. There is text galore. There are colors. There are very bright, vibrant colors. And then there is this photograph of the person in question, and you know exactly what is going on over here. It is basically an introduction, or it's a profile of Mr. Anand Mahindra. And here again, when you look at it, the focal point instantly draws you in. You first see the photograph, your attention is grabbed. What's going on over here? It's Mr. Anand Mahindra. What about Mr. Anand Mahindra? Everything you need to know about him, and then you kind of start reading about what is going on over here. Information is presented very cleverly. In a kind of a clockwise or anti-clockwise fashion over here around the focal point that we already saw a little earlier. All of that is going on there. There is an assistant or a supporting visual over here, because obviously Mahindra associated with the vehicle's photograph. Everything is working really well together, organized really well with the focal point to make this a very useful and a very well done flyer. Here's another example. Okay, so we saw this. Here's one more example. Again, an example where you have a lot of content. I mean, this is a page out of Harvard Business Review article that I read many years ago. A lot of content, but instantly you know what is going on over there, because instantly your focal point is drawn to Mohammed Salah. Okay, you have the photograph very prominent. There is a text happening here. You know who it is. And even before you start reading the content and the text, you are already prepared. You're primed for expecting what is going on in that flyer. So that's why the focal point and the emphasis that the focal point brings is incredibly important in a flyer. So when you do a flyer, make sure you're doing that. So you must have so by inference, in fact, or if you want to call it that way, so a focal point is important, and your focal point will derive from your number one or your most important message that you want to convey in your flyer, which means you must have a most important message that you want to convey in your flyer. So make sure that you have that. Make sure what the hierarchy of your messaging is in your flyer, and then organize them using the focal point principle, using the rule of thirds and the composition principle that you saw earlier to achieve maximum effect. So that's focal point for you. What do we have next? And then immediately after focal point, I don't know if you noticed me or caught me over there, I mentioned hierarchy. So you have the focal point, that's the biggest bit. But then you also have ancillary information happening around the slide, because you need to communicate a lot of stuff, right? So I'm going to go back to the previous slide, right, in just a minute, especially the Anand Mahindra slide, because This one for me is a personal favorite because you've got the focal point happening and then you've got a whole host of information that is running across the slide. So but do you notice not everything is written the same way, not everything is presented in the same way. So the designer is playing with a lot of things. He's playing with typography, he's playing with the size of fonts, imagery, colors, the weight of fonts, and so on and so forth. The spacing, the layout, how far is it, how the relationship between its neighboring elements, everything is into play. Leave those aside. But we come to an important concept called hierarchy. So I go back to that slide that we were talking. Where are we there? Here we go. Hierarchy. Now hierarchy it becomes critical because usually in a Toastmasters design execution, you are conveying a number of pieces of information at the same time, and that in itself presents a challenge. You're never ever speaking about one thing and only one thing. You're speaking of multiple things. You're speaking about the fact that this is a Toastmasters communication. You use the meatball. You're speaking of the fact that this is a District 127 event about from a club, your club that is in this division of this district of this area. You're talking about, say, a meeting theme, a meeting tier body, and so on and so forth. And then you need to communicate the date, the time, the venue, how to get there, so on and so forth. So any Toastmasters flyer typically is talking about a whole host of things. And then you immediately need to decide how you're going to arrange these things according to hierarchy, right? And hierarchy essentially is that. So what hierarchy essentially means, in what order are you going to present your information, or how are you going to what focus or what weight are you going to give to each piece of information that you're presenting in your flyer? To organize this, or to set this in the order it needs to be, you typically play with five elements. I mean, you of course have the images, but then use images and text and typography. You obviously have that. But then you will look at size, the size of each element. You would look at an interesting thing called contrast, and I will come to you in just 1 minute of how I used contrast in this particular flyer. You look at placement. Where do you place them for maximum effect? What needs to be up front, what can be in the sidelines, what can be as bylines, so on and so forth. You look at proportion. What is the proportion between each element, right? So the headline versus the byline, or the fine print, as you would call it, so on and so forth. And weight and proportion, more or less the same thing, but weight, of course, being what becomes heavier or more intense in your flyer, and what is not, so on and so forth. Which is what I used in this flyer. So I've got the background, all of those things are working. You know very well that we've got 4 speakers coming in here to have a panel discussion. So all 4 speakers are equal. So I had to make sure that they're all equal. So then I put them in photographs of equal size. We have organizers and the organizing committee over there who are kind of somehow subservient to this whole exercise. So they're there too, their photographs are there too, but they are of a smaller size. So there you see the proportion and the weight playing each other between these 2 elements. You already know that this is an event called Champions Assemble. Okay, so then, and you know that because Champions Assemble is a heavy font, is a headline placed up top, and is in the most, is in the is the how we call what's it called, the most vibrant color in this otherwise muted background. So I've used contrast over here, the maroon versus the gray, to push Champions Assemble as an element out. But there are other important elements too. So we got the area 24s of District 105 at that time. You've got the agenda elements, which are all important. So I played with the weight and the color and relative contrast to make sure these stand out with the amount of emphasis that they need. And I'm already running out of space here because I want to write agenda somewhere. I want to write or give some credo to the areas 24, 56, and 59. I struggled with it for a bit, and then this is what I did for agenda. So I still got agenda in over here, but I muted the contrast of agenda. So I have a large agenda written there. Contrast muted does both functions. So you're going to see the agenda. You're going to see it in a little bit lopsided fashion because I want to take it out of the way. Everybody knows this is the agenda. I'm just kind of underscoring it, and you have something over there that kind of does the purpose without disturbing the balance of everything else. And if I don't know if you can see this, There's also a 24, 56, and 59 I did over here. And here, they're not very important. They're just design conceits, if you will. I could have very well done without them, but I wanted to kind of add those, but I couldn't have them taking any attention. So I just played with textures over there. The background texture is different from the texture on the numbers, and then we have everything working together. And then I'm still using the rule of thirds. I've still put it on a grid. I've got the focal points working. I got the emphasis working, used hierarchy, and I have a working flyer, which is kind of effectively speaking about communicating a lot of huge density of information effectively to the audience. Make sense? Great, thank you. And let's go next to alignment. Yeah, alignment is good because alignment is always a it's how do you call it? It's like shining your shoes, right? Uh, if it is not there, people are going to notice. If it is there, they may not notice it, but it's going to be a slightly more pleasing example. One of my one of my role models, Mr. Yasser from Hill Capital Toastmasters back in Sri Lanka. I mean, I look forward to his work, and then I mean, he does alignment like nobody's business. And then you will of course see many things. I'm going to put an overlay, a grid over here. You see, so these yellow squares are where things are all aligned. All right, so this is, I mean, this is aligned so neatly over here on the top. If you see my laser going there, same with the bottom. But then he went one step further, and then he's also aligned. Do you see this triangle happening over here? You've got this little triangle that is created with the various no, no, the speech boxes or speech blurbs of the moments of truth, the elements of moments of truth. And then it just struck me when I saw this that he's created a certain funnel with with this whole thing, which kind of brings in or organizes the entire flyer for the sake of the viewer. I mean, this is like a design master doing his mastery, but ultimately you need to make sure that things are aligned because you would hardly have noticed if, for example, these three guys were not aligned to their left and neatly set. But now that they are, makes for a more pleasing and therefore a more organized flyer and visual, so to speak. Okay, so we'll keep this at moments of truth. We spoke about this funnel, and I still think it's one of the greatest things I've seen on a flyer forever. Next thing that we look at is negative space. You don't need to fill up your flyer with information, and it's not that you don't need to fill up your space or your canvas information. You should not, because the eye has a load, has a capacity for work. So you want to keep just the essential elements strategically placed. So you see, for example, in my PowerPoint slide, it's all mostly gray, nothing's there. But then what is there is there is very clear. It's easy for you to watch it. So negative space is a space that is not occupied on your canvas by elements. You want to have a healthy balance between the negative space where you have nothing, and then space where you have something. So that balance has to work in your design's favor. So you want to keep a watch for how that works in total. Here's another example of negative space. So I kept a lot of the canvas blank. So you see the maroon part, nothing over there. But what that negative space does is then it punches or it kind of improves the emphasis of the basic message that we're talking about, XCOM induction or whatever that image and the typography would be. So that's important to manage and to balance when you're doing a design. So here we are. So a quick summary of what we've seen through so far. I think I'm on my yellow. So we looked at the elements of composition over here. The elements of composition, these are the 6 primary elements that you want to look at: the grid, the rule of thirds, the focal point, hierarchy, alignment of your elements, and negative space. Play around with these, and when you work with these, with purpose, your design tends to stand for itself and communicate efficiently. A quick look into what are the mandatory meeting flyer items. So whenever you're doing a Toastmasters flyer, make sure that you're including these elements mandatorily. However you design it or how are you going to present it, you obviously need to kind of work towards it. But a club name, club address, a location, your club number, area, division, and district, a meeting theme, the Toastmasters of the day, if you have a Toastmasters of the day or the Master of Ceremonies, depending on what the meeting is, and then the date, time, location, city, and time zone. Essential. and you have to and please provide an RSVP address or a detail for people to come back to you in case they have queries or questions regarding your event. So no matter what other information you put, make sure that these are available to you in your flyers, designs, when you're doing flyers and designs, etc. And finally, leave you with Pablo Picasso. Learn the rules like a pro. It's very easy to kind of break rules if you don't know them, but it's really difficult to kind of break them when you know them. And I think learn the rules like a pro and break them like an artist is something that you want to look at. So instead of kind of fighting the rules or fighting guidelines or whatever that you need to do, understand them, see why they exist, what they are for, and then try and tweak them. We all do that. A lot of us do it very effectively, and I wish you would too. So that brings me to the end of the design session. I think, are we good for time, Toastmaster Prasanna? Very good. Oh, write that on. My God. The first time in my speaking career I've been dot on red. So I leave you at that. Open for questions. I think we'll have a Q&A session whenever you want to. I wanted to do brand guidelines. I think we can take it during the questions if you need to. But otherwise, back to you, Toastmaster Prasanna.
Thank you so much, DTM Rajesh, for that wonderful session. I believe the audience would have had a lot of takeaway content for their flyers. They are going to come back with some incredibly good flyers, which everyone in the district would be proud of. And thank you for that wonderful session. We'll come back to the question and answer once we are done with the second part of today's masterclass. So we'll carry on with the second part of today's masterclass. I will just introduce the second trainer for today. So our second trainer, Toastmaster Acha, he is someone who has turned his voice into a platform. Toastmaster Acha has been a proud Toastmaster for the past 3 years. He's not only the current president of JLT Toastmasters, but also a podcast host who knows how to transform ideas into conversations that travel far and wide. With Acha, it's not just about speaking, it's about connecting. He will help us discover how podcasts can be creative, authentic, and fun way to share our stories with the world. And trust me, when you hear his insights, you'll realize that starting a podcast is not as distant as it may seem. Over to you, Toastmaster Acha.
Thank you so much, TM Prasanna, for such a wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone, and happy to have all of you here. I'll just go ahead and share my screen 1 minute. Yeah. All right. I believe my screen is on?
Yes,
Okay.
Toastmaster Acha, see the screen.
Thank you so much. So, good evening again, everyone, all members of District 127, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this masterclass. And thank you to all the dignitaries in the room. So today, I'm just going to let's get into podcasting, and I want to keep this really short, so because I think this is a very long session. So today, I want us to be talking about what is podcasting, why should we do a podcast, and how should we get started? Okay, and so we are going to be looking at what is podcasting, and we're going to be looking at format of podcasting, and we're going to be looking at benefits of podcasting, especially to Toastmasters. And at the end, we're going to get deep into a 7-step framework on how you can start your podcast from start to finish. And the objective of this session is that every member of District 127 should start a podcast. So every club should have a podcast. Every member should have a podcast. So if you're attending this session today, I believe at the end of this session, you will have so much insight on how to probably start your own podcast. So what is podcasting? There's a lot of definition on what podcasting is, and I think everyone have their own definition. I believe everyone have their own definition because we all know what is podcast. Everyone have their own definition of what podcasting is. But if I have to bring it down right to the basics, podcast is just a form of digital content creation, and it could be audio, it could be video. Okay. Now, what makes podcast a podcast is the purpose of the podcast. So the purpose of podcast usually is either to inspire storytelling, to educate, to entertain, or you just want to start a podcast because you want to comment on what is currently happening, right? So that is what makes it a podcast. Otherwise, it's just a form of digital content creation, audio or video. Now we're going to be looking at when it comes to podcasts. Maybe you want to start a podcast today and you don't know which format to use. There could be several formats of podcasting, but I just had to narrow it down to 4. And the first one is a solo podcast. So with a solo podcast, it's just you sharing, you're just the only one sharing, you're entertaining. Again, remember the purpose of the podcast. It's either you're inspiring storytelling. Maybe you have a wealth of experience that you want to share and inspire people, and you just decide to start a solo podcast for yourself. That could be great, or you just want to educate people on maybe on a particular field that you feel like you have expertise in that particular field. That could also be great, but this is just you doing it yourself. And the next format is like interview-based podcast. So with interview-based podcast, you are the host, and then you invite a guest. It could be you invite a guest and to your show. So it's a conversation again on a subject that you chose, right? So this is what it's all about. And again, you have to remember the purpose. So it's either you're entertaining, or you just want to educate, or you want to inspire people. And we also have panel podcasts. So with panel podcasts, we have 2 more guests coming to the show, but you're the only one that is hosting it. And we have a co-hosted. So co-hosted is like you have 2 hosts, and then you have a guest coming to the show. Now, before you choose which format, again, you have to remember what is the aim. So at the end of the podcast, what information do you want to pass out there? Do you want to tell a story? Do you want to entertain? Do you want to educate? Or you're just a fan of what is currently happening, and you just want to keep commenting on the present happening. So you have to remember the aim of the podcast. Now, looking at the benefits of podcasting to Toastmasters, I think there are a lot of benefits when it comes to podcasts, especially to Toastmasters. It will improve your communication. There are a lot of benefits that I didn't include here. I just pick out 4. So, but aside this, it can improve your communication. It can make you become more confident. There are a lot of benefits when it comes to podcasting. But the few that I mentioned here is the first one is personal branding. So I believe that there are many of us that are attending this session today that we have expertise in a particular subject and no one knows us. And starting a podcast could be a great way to start, right? You just want to share your expertise in a particular subject, and it can help you in your personal life as well. You just want to, let's say you want to educate people, or you want to inspire people. Let's say you face a lot of you face a lot in your life, maybe for the past 30 years of your life, and you just feel like I can inspire someone out there. So starting a personal brand with a podcast is going to help you a lot. And the next one is build a network. So this is another one big thing when it comes to benefits of podcasting, right? Because starting a podcast will help you to create an audience for yourself. You start posting on on the media, and people will begin to know you. And you will start to have a specific audience will begin to be a fan of you because you're teaching them on a particular subject, or you're entertaining them on a particular subject that they have interest in. So that is a great benefit. And the next one is, by doing this, you gain visibility, all right? And you express, and the next one is express creativity. So starting a podcast will get you really, really, really creative because you want to make research. And again, if you're doing like a solo podcast, you really want to entertain people. So it's not just the story, it's how you place the story, how you make a few gestures, right? So it will get you really creative. Now, with that said, let's look at seven steps on how to podcast. So these are 7 steps for anyone that you don't know anything about podcasting and you want to start a podcast today. These are a few steps that I really did a lot of research in and I put together for that can really help you out. So the first one is, sorry. So the first one is you have to identify your topic and your niche. So if you want to start a podcast today, the first thing that you have to do is, what are you going to be talking about? The topic, right? And when it comes to the topic, you want to get a topic that you're really interested and passionate about that topic. So, and do not overthink the topic, right? If you're in finance, you may consider getting starting from there. Your medical doctor, you may consider starting from there. Again, you can always change it in future, but the main aim is for you to start and then kind of like see what works for you and what you need to improve, something like that. And then when it comes to niche, I think when you pick a topic, you want to really niche it down. Let's say you're in finance, you can decide to niche it down to maybe money management. All right. So when you niche it down to really like money management, now you're beginning to hit a particular group of people because you're being very specific. And this will help you to really know what people are interested in when it comes to your podcast. Now, the next thing is you want to choose a podcast name and a distribution method. So with a podcast name, again, you just pick a title and add your name to it. So back to the example I took on finance, let's say you decided to say, okay, I'll start with money management. So it can simply be maybe money management with Acha, okay? Or you're interested in food and you want to niche down to maybe how to make biryani. You can simply be that. How to make biryani with Prasan, just an example, right? So just pick a topic, niche down to get down to the basics, to a particular niche, and then just add your name to it. This is really how you can just get a title for your podcast easily. And the next thing after getting your title is you want to create an artwork. So the best platform for me was Canva. You can go to Canva and just search artwork or maybe podcast artwork, and you have several designs, and you just kind of like see what works for you. And you can just edit your photo, your title, and you're good to go. Or you can get, if you have someone that is really creative, they can do something for you, or you can do it yourself. You just have training on how to design and everything. So you can also do it yourself. And then the next thing is you want to pick a distribution method. So with a distribution method, so usually when it comes to podcasting, there are several platforms out there. Maybe there's Apple Podcast, there's Spotify, there's Google Podcasts, Anchor. I mean, there are many of them. So you don't want to go through the stress of uploading every session of a podcast that you do. You don't want to go through that stress of uploading in an Apple podcast, and then you go to Spotify, and then you go to Google Podcast. So you can choose a distribution channel. This is like Podcaster or Transistor. And this channel, when you upload it on it will share to other platforms, right? Like it will directly share it to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Podcasts and all other platforms if you're there. And you can also use YouTube as well. So YouTube, especially for video podcasts, is a good platform. And you can also do, so if you go to YouTube and you do create, you go to create, you will see an option there for upload your podcast. So you upload the podcast, it's going to be like a podcast and it's going to be like a video on YouTube. So this is a good way to start. And the next one is decide on the format of your podcast, okay, and the setup. So your setup will be based on the format you choose. So for example, if you want to start a solo podcast, then you know that your setup is just maybe a single mic and a single seat and maybe a one camera, you know, the setup will always be determined by the format. And if you want to, let's say, do an interview-based podcast, then you have to decide. I have maybe one guest with me, then I have to get maybe two mics, then I have to get maybe two seats, you know, two cameras or three cameras, depending on yourself. And for the setup, really at the beginning, there are several tools that you can use that are pretty easy to start with. But you can also maybe get into a studio. I mean, there's several affordable studios in Dubai right at the moment. You can just record a few from the studio just to have the feel of how it is or of how podcasting is. All right. And in my case, I just decided to start with a studio because I had to be bringing guests, and I didn't really get deep into mics and microphones and cameras, so I didn't want to go through the stress of maybe the sound is not okay at the end. So I invite someone and we have a 1 hour conversation and maybe the sound is not okay, so it was like troubling for me. So I had to get a studio and get few sessions going. So I can recommend that as well. If you're doing a solo podcast, you can view the setup for yourself, one camera, one seat, a few lights, and you're good to go. And the next one is just record few episodes. So now you have your setup. What are you waiting for? You just have to record a few episodes. So you can record like 4 episodes before you start posting them online. You can record like 4 episodes. And this few episodes is going to be a learning experience, because usually when you record this few episodes, if you've never been on camera before, you can record a few and then you feel like, oh, I don't like my voice. It happens, right? Like, I don't like the way I look. And so these few episodes, and you have to just keep recording, because this few episodes are going to be a learning experience, and you're going to get used to with yourself on camera, right? Looking yourself. Sometimes it doesn't feel good to you sometimes, but it can feel good to others, right? So you can feel like, oh, I don't like the way I talk. I don't like the way I look on camera. I look like this. You like self-judgment. You can judge yourself sometimes. It happens. So this first few episodes will help you to get rid of that and get used to with yourself on camera. So record first few episodes before you start posting online. And it helps because now when you start posting online, you have a wealth of content and you don't want to stop, right? When people start watching you, they're expecting more. So you'll have more contents to share with them. And the next one is edit. You have to edit your podcast. So now you've recorded the podcast. The next step you have to go with is to edit your podcast, right? And when it comes to editing, I'll say you should just keep it clean and simple. Clean and simple. Do not overdo the editing. Do not strive for perfection when it comes to editing. And the reason is that we are in AI driven world, right? Like most content out there are being like AI generated. So many people now are striving for the original content, the real human content. So if you overdo the editing, sometimes they may feel like it's not real, right? So just keep it clean and simple. And a few tools that you can use, I use Premiere Pro to do my editing, but Adobe has several software you can use to do editing, and there are also many other software out there for editing. You can use CapCut, you can use many other software out there for editing. All right, And where you should strive for perfection is at the beginning of the podcast, right? The hook. So, because this is where like the people that watch the hook, you want to keep them wanting to watch more. So you have to strive for perfection for that first 3 seconds or that first 4 seconds that people are going to be seeing. Like when they click on your podcast, that first few seconds, that is where you have to strive for perfection. And always it's a highlight of what happened throughout the podcast, right? Like you just pick some really interesting part in the podcast. It could just be a word, it could just be a statement, and you just put it together with some sound that keep that and makes it really interesting and engaging, and keeping the audience wanting more of it. So that is it. And the next thing is you just go ahead. Now you've recorded and now you've edited. The next thing is you just have to go ahead and publish it. And remember, you can use Podcaster. That will help you to publish your podcast on several platforms, which will make things very easy for you. Or you can post it on YouTube, whichever one you choose, and promote your podcast. Now, when it comes to promoting your podcast, what I do is I always use like the long form video. I kind of like divide it into maybe 1 minute or sometimes 48 seconds video, right? And I just post it on Instagram. It helps me to post it on YouTube as well. It helps me to promote. And with my videos on YouTube, I think the short form videos, like they are getting more views than the long form, which kind of like help people to want to watch more, right? Like the short form videos, so you want to make it really engaging that someone sees it, they want to go and look for they want to watch the full podcast, right? So this is one way you can use to promote your podcast. And the other way you can use to promote your podcast is you can leverage on the guests coming to your show. Let's say, like in my own case, I've interviewed people that they have maybe 20,000 followers on Instagram or 30,000 followers on Instagram. So when I do a podcast with them, I kind of like collaborate with them on Instagram. So this way I leverage on the audience, right? I get more views because I'm posting and at the same time they are posting. So the audience want to watch more, and again, it's my podcast, so the podcast is on my YouTube channel. So they kind of like go there and interested to have more of it. So this is one way that you can also use to promote your podcast. The last step is you just have to review for every upload. For the next podcast that you want to do, you want to see what went right, what can be improved. So you can just keep doing this and keep seeing what you can improve, right? I remember like a few months ago when I just started, I was posting on YouTube. I was getting like 20 views, like for the short form videos, like 20 views, like 10 views. I think the highest was like 20. And then I posted one shot one day and it got 1,700 views. And I was really curious to know what I did to get to move from 20 to 1,700. So and then when I get deep into it, I realized that I used a few hashtags that made the video. So I used the same hashtag on the next video on the next day, and it got like 1,400. So I realized that okay, this is the hashtag that I'm going to be using henceforth. So for every upload that you use, you can just see what went right and see how you can keep doing that and see what to improve. So I'm with Red now. So this is the end of the little session I had on podcasting. I hope it helps someone out there to start a podcast, and looking forward to your question. And if you want to start a podcast and you need my help, please, my number is there, reach out to me and I'll be happy to help you. So that's my time. Thank you so much. And back to you, TM Prasanna.
Thank you, Toastmaster Acha, for that wonderful session on podcasting. Great. So I believe many of the future podcasters are going to come from the district. Thank you so much, Toastmaster Acha. And
Thank you.
if you can just let them know what's your podcast channel's name, they would be following you happily.
Yeah, so my channel name is Success in Dubai. Yeah, I'm really curious to know what people
Success
think
in
about
Dubai.
success,
Yeah,
right?
that's a
Yeah.
good one. And yeah, thank you so much, Toastmaster Acha, for sharing the wealth of your knowledge on podcasting with our members. And with that, we are done with the training for today, and we will take on the questions from the audience who are present here, and then we have some online questions as well. I'll put that forth once we are done with the audience question. So if you want to ask any questions from our two trainers, please unmute and please raise your hand, and I'll just ask the Zoom master to unmute you, and then you can carry forward with your question. Anyone has any questions? I'll just wait for a bit before I take on the questions which has been put forth when everyone was registering. There were a few questions put forth. I'll go by that one by one. Anyone from the, yeah, Jinal, your question, please.
Good evening, and thank you for a lovely session. Both the trainers were extremely, extremely insightful. They shared amazing resources. It comes handy for all of us. One question is to distinguished Toastmaster Rajesh. What is the one branding mistake, if I may say, is that you're seeing more often in the flyers which are running through the district? And how we can avoid it, how we can just move around from that?
So, okay, delicate question, a delicate answer, I suppose, to a delicate question. But typically, I mean, what usually goes over the rails? One is typography.
Okay.
What fonts are you using to create your content? Second is the colors that you use in your flyers, right? And especially in this part of the world, we have a friendly relationship with colors. So we tend to kind of go a little overboard with whatever colors that we use. Very easily dealt with. It is a challenge, and I've seen this in the many years that I've been viewing content as well as speaking about this, that it's a challenge to kind of keep with those four, maybe five colors that we have. But as we have proven, exhibited, illustrated time and again, it is done. Just kind of needs a little bit of imagination, a bit of creativity, and then you can come up with good stuff. So colors and typography, I suppose, are the worst culprits, so to speak, if there are.
Yes. And how about the images, the photography? It's sometimes I find it too distractive. I feel like,
Correct. I mean, like, I purposely kept imagery away. It is also there, but then when you start doing this, then everything becomes a problem. But you know, the way I would look at it is, you can create an extremely effective flyer using just typography, a few selected graphics, and your brand guideline colors. Images are always an add-on. I mean, they're a supporting element. You're right, and you nailed it there. Too many pictures is too much of distraction. The brand guidelines are very specific, very clear in terms of what we should be using. There are gray areas, so on and so forth. I'll keep away from it because it's a slightly delicate, or it's a touchy subject, so to speak. But typography and colors, I think everyone can manage it easily.
yeah. To summarize, then less is more.
Always less is more. I mean, if you saw my content, I always aim for less is more. But hey, that's also a style issue. So yeah,
Yes.
back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with any questions? Toastmaster
Yes.
Smriti, you
Yeah,
raised your hand.
just one quick question, DTM Rajesh. You mentioned the difference between design and decorate initially. I myself am a designer, so I would like to get your elaborated probable explanation on that, because I've had people, confused between that. So I just want your maybe detailed explanation on that.
Right. I don't know how I can do a detail, but then let me try.
I
Let
have
me.
my answer already.
And I think
I
we should
mean,
discuss this. So, what are your points? Okay,
not
let me put forth my view, and then I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. It'll be a great point to
yeah,
discuss, right? So, one thing we
yes.
mistake is there is design for the sake of design, which means that's the so-called artistic or the, not the creative end of it. We are also in a creative end of it, but there's something that's, for want of a better word, let's call it the artistic end of it, where you design for the sake of design. So you want to add elements, subtract elements, arrange elements because you want to create something. The objective is open-ended, right? So which is how you would come out with, say, a work of art, a painting, so on and so forth. But we must be very careful about the fact that we are not artists, right? We are communicators, or we are selling something. We are communicating something. What we're communicating is the ability to communicate. Oh, sorry, but that went around in a circle. So in the commercial spectrum, there is a very specific objective to why you would use design, and that is to speak your brand, to present your brand, and to speak it correctly, consistently, and clearly. And therefore, since the objective is defined, how you then present design or use design to present your communication then becomes very structured. You have to have it structured, right? So I want to attain a certain purpose. That purpose is specific. To achieve that purpose, I need to use design as a force multiplier, as an amplifier, so on and so forth. That is why you can use design to decorate, but that's not the purpose. The design is there, exists to communicate your brand's voice in the way you want it to be heard by your audience. I don't know if that makes sense. So that's the primary motive. If that leads to decoration, so be it. You want to, like Gina just mentioned just now, you want less is more. But I mean, those are all many different languages of design. But if your design leads to decoration after achieving its primary motives, objectives, so be it. It's not for the sake of decoration. I'd like to hear your thoughts, Smriti.
No, I think you put it perfectly actually. So yeah, uh, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else with any questions before I take on the questions which came forward online? Okay, I'll move to the questions which came in online. There were a couple of them which came in. This one in particular for, I think, from Toastmaster Kalani. And this is directed at Toastmaster Acha. Key elements to look at when doing a podcast for the first time. I think you already answered it, but just to reiterate, if you could explain that a bit, Toastmaster Acha. So Toastmaster Kalani wants to know the key
Key
elements,
elements.
yeah, to look at when
So
doing a podcast for the first time.
yeah, so just like I said, it will depend on what you want to do. So what is the end result of the podcast, right? If you want to inspire a story, and if you want to do it by yourself, or if you want to invite someone. So key things that you should always look at is how you want to pass your message out there. And I think that is at the foundation of what podcasting is. So when you get to how you want to pass your message out there, because you already have the message, now how do you want to pass it out there? And then if you want to do it by yourself or if you want to do it with someone else. So I'll say these are key things that you should look out for. I don't know if I answered that question. I don't know if she want me to be really specific at something.
I think that should be good enough. You already covered most of it during your session, but I think that would have answered her question. I don't think so. She's there currently. I just wanted to put forth the question
Oh,
which was sent across online. There's another one from Toastmaster Sherdel. Are the Centennial logos still in use? Which are required role play photos to be included in the flyer? The first part I can answer. The second I'll direct it to DTM Rajesh. So the Sentinel logos can be used till October, and thereafter you shouldn't be using ideally the Sentinel logos. The second part of the question, if DTM Rajesh could take it over, that which required role players photos to be included in the flyer. DTM Rajesh, any insights on that?
I mean, you really don't need to. put any role player's photo on the flyer. Okay, so there is no rule in the sense. There is nothing. There is no rule mandate. There is no suggestion criterion. Nothing of the sort that says which role player's photo you should include in the flyer. It is entirely your choice. It is usually a convention of the particular club or the district or the division as to what they put and how they put over there. Having said that, and again, here I'll present you with two schools of thought. Like I said, if you can wing it, swing it, you can make a perfectly good flyer using only typography and colors without using a single image. Image always works. Image is a powerful, amplifier of your message. So if you have to choose whose photo that you would like to use, and then use it that way in the same manner. Now, it's very kind of effectively done if you know what is the key message you're communicating with your flyer. If it's a club meeting, club meetings are usually headed by the Toastmaster of the day and or an education sessionist, or so on and so forth. You probably want to have one of them on your club meeting flyer. A PR masterclass like this is headed by whoever is training. So therefore, if you watch the PR masterclass flyer, you have the two trainers on board, so on and so forth. Otherwise, it's ultimately entirely up to you. Be wary of your messaging. And when I say your messaging, you have to be very clear what is your primary message and what your supporting messages are. And then you populate your flyer with whatever images or elements that you need to. I hope that answers.
Yeah, that's good enough. Yeah. Thank you so much, DTM Rajesh, on that. We have a couple of more questions. This one is probably a googly anyway. So Toastmaster Arpita just wants to ask, does sticking to TMI brand specification for meeting flyers and reels curb the creativity? I'll open it up for all three of you, Jinal, Toastmaster DTM Rajesh, and Toastmaster Acha. So your insights on that question. It's a trick question, so your insights on that question. You want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, repeat the question and let's go. Who would like to go first?
Okay. So the question is, does sticking to TMI brand specification for meeting flyers and reels curb the creativity? It's coming from Toastmaster Arpita.
It's not about curbing the in fact, it gives us more chance to be creative in the limited resources. I feel that's the best way we can do. As I have always believed the same thing, I would repeat again, less is more. It is wasting of time going about changing images and making it more creative. I feel this is channelized. It's fair enough. And again, it's not so elegant also when we are more focused on public speaking and communication, where we are going all about the themes and decorative elements. It's a Toastmaster flyer first, and then the theme comes. So that is a secondary aspect. First, you have to be more compliant with the Toastmaster. Your thoughts, DTM Rajesh?
I think I'll just underscore echo what you said, Jinal, and that's exactly it. The Toastmasters flyer or any communication element is not a platform, a pretext, or a place for you to exercise your creativity or to exhibit your creativity. You use creativity to make sure that your message is being carried across according to the limits. I wouldn't even call them limits, according to the strictures posed by the brand guidelines, right? The priority and the objective, the single-minded objective, is to communicate what you're trying to do there, not to show your artistic skills.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Toastmaster Acha, your take on that?
Yeah, I think I'll second Rajesh on what he just said. I think the objective is for you to communicate your thoughts, like to communicate your message out there. So staying within the frame, it helps you to even be more creative, because you already know which colors to use, you already know you already have a logo, you already have whatever it takes. So it's just for you to be more creative on how to create your flyers with everything that has been given to you. And the objective is for you to communicate your message out there. So I think it makes you more creative because you already have the tools. You just have to, how do I use them in a different way? For me, I think that's it.
Okay. So we'll just take two more questions before we wrap it up. So there's another one which is coming from DTM Nisha, and how to technically ensure the branded colors and fonts with basic skills. Uh, any one of you would like to throw some light on that?
I didn't hear the second part or the latter part of that question. Repeat that,
So how to technically ensure the branded colors and fonts with basic skills?
Oh, you can. It's very simple because every color has a hex code, right? So you just follow the hex code. They're there in the brand guidelines, in the brand manual. Every content making software, Canva, PowerPoint, all the Adobes, if that's what you're using, recognize and will help you apply those colors, the specific colors, by their hex code. So they're the hex or the CMYK codes. Just go to the brand manual, you will see them. A copy of the brand manual is on the chat over here if you don't have it, and you can apply it. It's a very fun, it's a very basic way of doing that. Similarly with typography. Now in typography, remember that the brand guidelines prescribes a number of different fonts or typefaces. Some of those, Gotham, for example, is a paid font. Most of us will not pay, but the brand guidelines, the manual also recommends or suggests free alternatives to those fonts, which are available for download online. You can access them very easily. In fact, you can access them from the brand manual itself. So access it from the brand manual, upload it into your computer. You've got your fonts, apply the colors according to the hex codes, and you're right there.
Thank you so much, DTM Rajesh, on that perspective for that question. And this would be the last question, and we will answer all the other questions in person to those who send the questions directly. The last question is coming from Toastmaster Manpreet, and it's just a long question. I'll just read it out. So this is what the question is. For any flyer design, it is said that the primary focus or concept should be Toastmasters branding with actual photos, and the secondary or assisting design concept can be any other element like illustration. How do we decide how much of secondary things are okay in that design? The clarity isn't there, and it's like one person, the design seems okay, and the other sometimes it's violating the TMI guidelines. How to tackle this? Again, it's a long answer for such a question, but if we can try to answer that question, between Jinal and Rajesh, if we could see how we can effectively answer that question. I'll put forth my perspective also on that.
Jinal, you want to take it first?
Did you get the question, Jinal, or you want me to repeat the question?
Let DTM Rajesh, I'll second the points.
Okay. So yeah. So again, so let's be very clear about it. I again come back. So the question here was, what do we select as the key visual? What do we select as the support visual? Number one, and then there seems to be this question about what is approved, allowed by guidelines, and what is not, and how do we kind of balance the two? So let's break that down. Number one is, like I said before, you don't need to use a visual. So if you're able to get a flyer without a visual, so be it. You can do that. It's a skill, and you can do that too. If you're using a visual, the brand manual very explicitly and very specifically states what kind of imagery you can use. And to pick a line from the manual, you want to use images that show leaders, communicators in an empowered, in a cohesive, in a cooperative setting, ideally, right? And they also tell you to stay away particularly from a particular set of images, landscapes, babies, photos, food, or images that kind of tend to focus or tend to narrow the entire messaging around that. So you know what you can do, should do, you know what you should not be doing, and need not be doing, so to speak. And then, having said that, and we understand that this has always been a bugbear forever, as long as I've been dealing this, there's always a gray area. And I think the only way, I mean, there's no real clean answer to that. But the only way you want to do that is to go back to first principles. One, what are you communicating to your audience with your flyer? Two is, how much are you complying with what should be done and what should not be done? And then, be the judge, and be the judge yourself. Bring your sense of intelligence, integrity, and even interpretation, if you will, to a certain extent, to project it as such. Illustrations, particularly, I believe, if I remember correctly, are not encouraged, primarily because most illustrations may be protected by copyright. Now, if you're in Canva, Canva gives you a free set. You may still be able to use it. And so the primary reason why they don't want you to use illustrations, clip arts, etc., like images, and the same count is because of the copyright issue. So that's why you want to be a bit careful. There's nothing really kind of otherwise going behind it. I mean, you can always argue many things in terms of is it an illustration or not, so on. So let's not get into that rabbit hole. So to summarize the response, be very clear what you're messaging, and then once you're doing that, be very clear if you want to use an image to deliver that messaging. Once you're clear about that, then try to be with what is prescribed, what is encouraged. Try to stay away from what is not. This is a general way to go, and be a good judge yourself in terms of where this thing lies down. I'll be honest. I've gone through many designs. I've created many designs where I've taken a bit of leeway, leverage. I go back to brand. I go back to TMI to get their inputs into it. So on. So many ways in how you can tackle it. Long question, therefore long answer. I know we're kind of running out of time. Prasanna already kind of threw a thumb at me. Back to you, Prasanna. I hope that answers.
Thank you so much, DTM Rajesh, for that elaborate answer to a trick question. There's no like boxed way of answering that. It's a long perspective question which could be answered in multiple ways. But you did cover a lot of the aspects of the question which was put forth. Thank you so much. So with that, we will wrap up the questions, and thank you so much for everyone who joined in. I would like to thank our timer, Toastmaster Smriti, for taking up the role, and our Zoom master, Toastmaster Jinesh, was taking up the role. So we had a wonderful session. We were coming in curious about branding, design, and podcast, and we are walking away with ideas, strategies, and tools that can transform the way we present ourselves and our clubs. So we learned not just the theory about it, we learned about branding, how the world would see us and how we can present it. We learned about the design part of it, and we learned about podcasting so that our voices can be heard far and wide beyond the meeting rooms which we are usually conducting our meetings, far and wide across the way we can communicate with other clubs, other members, other guests. So thank you, Toastmaster Acha, for taking that session on podcast, and the team Rajesh, as wonderful as ever, with those insights and perspectives on tackling design as such. And I believe that every member who was present and once we share the videos will benefit from this session. Uh, on a weekend evening, thank you everyone who joined in for today's masterclass. We'll come back with more sessions which are beneficial for everyone. Thanks everyone who joined in. Thank you, Jinal, for the opportunity. Thanks to the district director and everyone who came in for today's session. And with that, we'd like to wrap it up. And if any questions are still there, and if you still have some last minute questions to be put forth, you can put it forth